Welcome to Big Ten Day today. Glad to have you with us in our Chicago studios. Mike Hall and Anthony Herron. I am in what has often become your chair now.
Is my name on the back of it?
I thought it was weird.
Yeah.
You had permanent marker, too. Put it
Right.
on tape or something, you can pull it off.
I mean, I'm not going to say if I did it or not, but I may have done it.
But it does match your handwriting perfectly.
Oh, it's I.
We were having you sing before the show began, and you said
Some walk by night. Why are you doing this? Because you know I can't resist.
I mean,
I don't know how moonlighting came up, but for some reason it did.
I just threw the softball in the air. You took a swing.
Moonlighting. What? We're going to have to pay for this if I keep singing it, though.
Yeah, I think that's our boss on line one.
That's going to come out of your bank account.
How do we move on to our big story today? Right off the bat, we have a football expert in Anthony Herron with us, so we might as well focus on this coming weekend. There are spring games and spring practices left and right in the Big Ten. All of these squads are having either an official spring game or a spring practice. So we're going to talk with Bret Bielema coming up a little bit later on, and kind of the nature of spring games has really evolved. I mean, I remember when we launched as a network, it was there is a game. You were having team versus team, and there is a scoreboard, and a lot of places still do that, but a lot of places have made it more just kind of a way to get through the event without getting injured. How has it changed to you?
It's definitely evolved in that way. I was just talking to PJ Fleck about that this morning on Big Ten Radio, just that, you know, for even as a head coach in the years that he's been in the Twin Cities, yes, there was one approach initially when he took the program over, but then it's evolved over time. Of course, at my alma mater, Kirk Ferentz has been there. So for me, spring football under Kirk Ferentz was one thing in Iowa City in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. That has evolved over time because there's a couple of different factors. One, of course, the most recent and the biggest one is the transfer portal, the way that rosters tend to evolve even just throughout the months of the offseason. But then also it's not quite as necessary. You are in shape and you are on the grind pretty much year-round throughout college football. So it's not as necessary to get those additional physical reps in just to have everyone ready. A lot of college teams have now gone to more of a pro approach just to make sure that you have sort of off-season OTA minicamp sort of style as opposed to feeling like you got to get padded up and bang around the whole time.
Well, you brought up the transfer portal, and that's where I want to go with this segment. Is I want to look at the teams that are having spring games, and you give us an idea on who's someone we should keep an eye on for each of those teams. And it feels weird. I mean, personally, as a fan of college football, like I'm starting to prep, and I'm going, wait, who's on this team?
Yeah.
Because it's a constant feeling of free agency, and someone was here, but then they're not here, and then they agreed, and then they backed out, and so it's a little tough to get a grasp on someone who's an important name. Let me start with the Indiana Hoosiers.
Okay.
They have a brand new head coach. They also have a brand new quarterback that just transferred in.
I believe they should be legitimately excited about Curtis Rourke coming in because he's got a great resume. He was the MAC Player of the Year a few years ago at Ohio. Had a nice season this past year as well, but got a little bit banged up. This is, to me, one of the things that should be remembered about the transfer portal, where he's a player who came out of Canada. He's got bloodlines where his brother is a high-level quarterback as well, playing professional football. But he's been at the sort of mid-major, group of five sort of level. Now this is an opportunity for Curtis Rourke at the Power 5 level in the Big Ten Conference to measure himself against the very best in the sport. He's a big guy with a live arm, and Curt Cignetti has had success on offense and specifically with the quarterback position at every other stop he's been at. So while, yes, it's a loss for Ohio, but it is a gain for the Indiana Hoosiers because he is legitimately talented. I expect big numbers from Rourke this season.
Speaking of big numbers, he's tall, 6'5".
True.
For a QB, which is good. And I liked when I talked to...
Great analysis from you, by the way.
Well, it's just looking at a number.
Okay, I mean, it's fair. Yeah.
But I talked with Cignetti back on signing day, and he said, he reminds me of is Philip Rivers.
Oh, okay.
Now, as we'll talk, Cignetti is an interesting character, and he's certainly prone to say interesting things, so maybe that's unfair. But he coached Philip Rivers, so he's got a little idea of what he's talking about.
He does, and that pedigree, just knowing how to develop signal callers. I was able to talk to Curt Cignetti on this show earlier in the week, and one thing he pointed out was that he tries to match his system, his scheme, to the style of the QB himself. And in the case of Curtis Rourke, it may not be where it's just, a five-step drop every time trying to heave the ball deep down the field, but leaning into the nuance of how he's able to throw the football and getting accustomed to that in the spring. One good thing is even though it's not the most physical form of practice, Curt Cignetti tends to take an approach where this spring they've had 13 out of the 15 practices. They'll be we'll be able to check them out tonight on the Big Ten Network. And so utilizing that amount of practices, less time on the field individually each time out, It's not the most physical. The line of scrimmage isn't banging consistently, but you can still get a lot out of the skill work. The quarterbacks throwing to the receivers, the running backs working on their steps and timing out of the backfield. So we should get to see, we won't see the final version of Curtis Rourke as he takes the field with the Hoosiers in the spring, but we'll see some gains. Kurt Cincinnati has already seen gains in that quarterback, and he hasn't named him as the starter, but he was willing to say on this network earlier in the week to me that, yeah, there is a gap that's beginning to widen between Rourke and Taven Jackson at the moment.
I think when you turn to Illinois, there's a gap at the quarterback position there. Luke Altmaier is the guy. There doesn't seem to be much of a question. Your incoming transfer is a guy who can help in tight end Cole Rusk.
Really love the name. There's no doubt about that. The name is a very fun one. But aside from that, the game itself, another player stepping up to a higher level of the sport, who's got some family lineage. His dad was also an athlete for the Illini. And so this is an opportunity that Cole Rusk has been waiting for a long time. And so now he's really excited about joining up with the Illini. Essentially, his dream program is the way that he's described it. But he's been an All-American before this, now getting a shot at the FBS level, at the Power 5 level, and being able to do so with a team that values the tight end position the way that Bret Bielema and the Illini do. And they'll need that. When you have continuity at quarterback and in Barry Lunny Jr.'s offense, we do know that they're losing tight end talent to the National Football League right now. So this is an opportunity, a slot at tight end with a pass-catching weapon that they're bringing in Cole Rusk, where now they'll have the potential to continue to have the development and the production at that spot.
Again, we're going to have Bret Bielema join us, the head coach of the Illini, in just a little bit. I'm going to ask him which position group is impressing him the most thus far this year. Those first two transfers were from smaller schools, Ohio and Murray State. Your next transfer is going to Michigan. Jayshawn Barham comes from Maryland. Right
there within the Big Ten Conference, the Wolverines have seen him and they've been impressed by him. He entered the portal, and certainly a big loss for Maryland is Jayshawn Barham because of the talents that he brings to the table. But Maryland's loss is the Wolverines' gain. And what I'm hoping for, just my observations in calling a bunch of Maryland games over the last couple of seasons that Jayshawn Barham has been there, Maryland used him as an off-ball, in-the-box linebacker. That's frankly where he prefers to play. But as they started to shift him around, get him out on the edge, start to utilize the pass rush skills that he brings to the table, I think in Michigan's very, sort of versatile defensive scheme that I anticipate we'll end up seeing them run this season, I do think that Jayshawn Barham as an outside linebacker, as a rush defender, playing the edge more consistently is where he's best suited. And especially when you project to the National Football League, then I do think that that's likely where Michigan, because of all the talent they've put in to the National Football League, and that there's no reason to think that will continue to be the case, that they'll kind of project Jayshawn Barham in that role as well, because he's an exceptional pass rusher. He's a great and a physical edge setter as a run defender also. So for him, as an every down guy, he's already played at a high level in the Big Ten. I think the Wolverines will utilize him well.
Yeah, two-time honorable mention All Big Ten performer while he was a Terp. Let's stay in the state of Michigan now, go to Michigan State. All three of their quarterbacks last year popped into the portal.
Right.
So Michigan State is bringing on a guy who was with his head coach to be potentially their future quarterback right now.
I'm looking forward to calling this game on Saturday on the Big Ten Network because Aiden Childs is a quarterback that I've been watching since he was in high school. He played in the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, so I got to witness him at that time when he was first committing to Jonathan Smith while he was still at Oregon State. Childs just spent this past season in Corvallis, so he'll show up. He has shown up in East Lansing, already knowing the offense, already having some in-game action. And I got to tell you, I mean, because of the fact that he chose Oregon State over a variety of other programs, bigger names, bigger brands who were after him on the recruiting trail, because he was kind of a late riser like C.J. Stroud. Now, I'm not predicting that Aiden Childs is C.J. Stroud.
It sounds like you are. It sounds like you're saying
but that
Aiden Childs is the next C.J.
I mean, similar stature, and what impresses me as much as anything, similar mentality.
Yeah.
Because they were both late risers in recruiting. And, they're not these guys who were five-star out of the gate, who were the quarterback du jour as soon as they stepped onto the high school field. Aiden Childs dealt with injuries his junior season, missed a bunch of time then, and then just set the world ablaze as a senior. And so I'm really excited about seeing what Jonathan Smith's offense, having continuity in his system at quarterback, at center, at tight end. He brings a lot with him from Corvallis, and then just sort of the mentality, the aptitude that Aiden Childs will bring, his personality. He exudes a confidence, but a very approachable sort of confidence, kind of like yourself. So he's very approachable, very likable. People like to be around Aiden Childs.
Yeah. Just like me?
I wouldn't go that far.
All right, we got halfway there. I do think it was interesting that Childs, it wasn't seconds after Smith left for Michigan State, but it wasn't long after that he transferred over and very quickly was like, I trust him. I remember we talked to him again on a signing day. He was like, I trust him. I want to be with him. He's my guy. That's really helpful for a brand new head coach, that the most important guy in terms of playing time on your roster is already on board with you hand in glove.
The physical attributes, the mental and emotional maturity of Aiden Childs. I'm really stoked for Michigan State fans to see what the quarterback position can become. Now, don't get any mistake, don't mistake it at all. Jonathan Smith and Brian Lindgren's offense, they're going to run the football. There's talent that returns back there. So it won't all be on the shoulders of Aiden Childs to make every throw and make every play. Some experience back on the offensive line as well. But when it's time to make a play, Aiden Childs can do it both with his arm, with his legs, and he's now in a position already where he can sort of help teach the offensive system to others around him. Even though inexperienced, he's still a very young football player.
Right, just a true freshman last year. Just time for one more. USC has a spring game. You got your eye on a safety, Kamari Ramsey, who transferred from across town.
I mean, they needed help. They needed personnel help. They needed the defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn, to come in, so they swiped him away from UCLA. And Kamari Ramsey just comes right over with him. A very talented, a big physical safety. And for all the gains that USC needs to make on defense, on the back end, there's a lot of talent that they've added there. And so for Lincoln Riley, we know he's going to figure things out on offense. Kamari Ramsey could be the main reason that USC's defense looks much improved over last season.
3 years of eligibility left for Ramsey as well. Much more coming up with Anthony throughout our show. Here's our big interview now. We're glad to bring in the real Bret Bielema, who's joining us from Champaign to talk about this upcoming game he's got. Bret, you've been in the Big Ten for so long. You've been a head coach for so long. How have spring games changed over the years that you've been a head coach?
Great question, Mike. This is my 16th year as a head coach. Basically, majority of those have been, in the Big Ten, 5 at Arkansas, but 11 here in the Big Ten. And I would tell you they've changed dramatically for 3 reasons. Really, you have so many new players that enter your program, right? It's not just the seniors leaving and a couple of freshmen. I had 10 new incoming freshmen that literally went to prom this semester as well as spring practice. And then, on top of that, you have we have 12 new players from transfers that entered, right? And then on top of that, because of the way your roster is so transitional, you can get really lean at certain positions in a hurry. I had to cut a practice short because we ran out of inside linebackers. So it's different because of the numbers game, but also, I don't think the game of football has changed. You're still trying to get better every day on fundamentals. Football is great, but we really take these 15 practices. Good football plays are usually the result of good fundamentals, and that hasn't changed.
What is the goal of a spring game now? Or is there really no goal? It's just our 15th practice.
I just think that kids will go anywhere you ask them to go as long as they know where they're going, right? So we literally set up practice goals. When we go to scrimmages, we set up scrimmage goals, offense, defense, special teams. So there are goals that take place. For me as a head coach, the number of guys that enter the field on Saturday at spring game, I want that same number to leave, right? Because hopefully we stay injury-free. But I think overall, you want to get better at football. You want to instill confidence. We do a lot of ones against the world because I want those ones to play with some confidence and let our twos understand that if they play against the best and have success, they'll move up. So there's a lot of little hidden gems in a spring game every week.
Yeah, you mentioned prom. I heard you on the radio with Anthony and Matt Schick the other day talking about your story about your QB, Petty, who you've promised moms, anyone who comes out of high school early to the program, you'll let them go back for prom. And he took you up on it.
He did. He took me up. What I didn't know is he was going solo. I thought he had some live date that he was going to see, but he was going solo. He said, Coach, I'm going with me, myself, and I, which I love because that kid is a QB through and through.
I was just going to say he's clearly got confidence, which is good. Give me the big picture landscape on that position, the quarterback spot on this upcoming Illini team.
Obviously Luke started a lot. Luke Altmaier started a lot of games for us, was a transfer in from Ole Miss. I think last year was a huge growth process for him, just not football-wise, but also playing the way we play here at Illinois. Tommy DeVito obviously set the stage a year before as a one-year transfer out of Syracuse. We got excited because Luke has it met his 2 to 3 years and thought he had good growth. Unfortunately, got knocked out of a game, missed a couple games, and I think during that process really appreciated what he had, and his growth this spring has been awesome. His early down understanding, his ability of the concept. I think offensively, Barry Lunny, another spring with him is just the growth has been unbelievable. Added a guy in the wide receiver room, Coach Stepp, who joined us from South Carolina, and him and Barry had worked previously. I think the continuity in the passing game is very evident, and the running game has gotten better. We got some new and some guys have improved from last year in the O-line room. So not only Luke, but I would say Donovan Leary from a year ago to this year might be one of our most improved players. Really excited about what he brings to the table. You can see his demeanor, his confidence, his swagger. You know, he was a good player when we recruited him, playing really good football right now. Excited about him. And then a couple other guys, Kirkland Mishaw, who joined us a couple of years, has gotten a lot better and done some really good things in that with the threes. Trey Petty coming in, Cal Swanson, some guys that have really done a nice job, and really excited to see that room on Saturday.
If I made you pick one position group that has made you feel very good as we're coming to the end of the spring, what would it be?
You know, I would say in general on defense, by far the outside linebacker room, and on offense, the O-line room, the growth at both of those rooms. Have a lot of good returning players, and we added a few new guys into it, especially on the offensive side. We've really added some guys in there that I think have bolstered us immediately. So Bart Miller and then also an assistant coach, Byron Bell, who's our graduate assistant, played in the league for 8 years, that has really been a dynamic impact into our room. So overall, offensive line as a whole in the entire roster, probably the biggest jump in the way they perform. Josh Geske, Josh Kreutz, a guard in the center that have really grown. Zy Chrysler has been with us the whole time. J.C. Davis, Melvin Priestley, Kevin Wigginton, some guys that we brought in from the outside world, has really turned that offensive line room into something that I think we all hoped it would be.
This year, Memorial Stadium, this legendary palace of college football, is 100 years old, and in October, you're going to play Michigan, the 100th anniversary of that legendary Red Grange 6-touchdown game against the Wolverines. You have a program with such incredible history of players like Grange and Dick Butkus and all that. What is it like educating these young players about the particular program they have and the legacy that was there before them?
It's been really fun. Even me coming here, you know, I was from Illinois. I didn't go to school here, but I learned a lot about Illinois. I've been in this conference at a couple other stops and learned about Illinois' history, but nothing like when you get here, Memorial Stadium, to have the names of fallen soldiers at the base of every one of those columns around our stadium that define Memorial Stadium. You mentioned it with Red Grange, and then obviously Dick Butkus passing last year, to see the outpour of emotions there. This game has meant a lot to our athletic director, Josh Whitman, who, in my opinion, is the best AD in the entire country, who went to school here. He's from Indiana, came here, played, got 2 degrees. Now he leads our entire athletic department. It's meant a lot to him. We literally talked about that game that day, going back to my first interview. So I know it means a lot to Josh. We're going to do a lot of special things around that game, but ultimately to play Michigan at our place in Memorial Stadium. We lost a heartbreaker up there a year ago to a really good football team. So I think our guys have been excited about that game. Got quite a few before and after it, but that game will be very special.
You know, looking back at last season, Bret, there were so many close games for you guys. I mean, half the contests were a field goal or less. Does a close loss inspire you that you're getting your team closer to where you want it to be, or does it drive you crazy that you were 1 or 2 plays away from a win?
You know what, Mike, to be honest, it's probably a little bit of both worlds. As a head coach, I always got to view things from 60,000 feet up, right? Like, just, you got to do that in our profession. For me, I know where we've been, where we're going. Going into my 4th year, I couldn't be more excited about where we are. There's things in the past that have upset me, but also things that have made me excited, right? Like, if you take a holistic approach, my first year we went 5-7. If we could have one more win, would have been bowl eligible. Next year, we start off rolling 7-1. Unfortunately, hit a hiccup, losing 3. Go to the bowl game and have a heartbreaker at the bowl game to go 8-5. But we played in a January 1 bowl game for the first time in a long time. And then last year to go 5-7 again. To know that if we could have found one more win in year 1 and year 3, we would be at 3 straight bowl games, which is unprecedented in Illinois history. But you can wish in one and have reality in the other, which, you know, and I know where we're going. And I think our kids feel it. I think we have an inspired football team, coaching staff, been able to bring some new guys in. But I couldn't be more excited about where we're at and where we could potentially go. We built this thing the right way, and we built it on a solid foundation. So I really excited about where this program is going.
I know one of your goals, obviously, is winning games, and one of them is obviously raising young men. But also, it's that opportunity to take a high schooler and turn him into an NFL player, which you will have this upcoming week when the NFL draft is coming, whether it's Johnny Newton, the Isaiahs, Randolph, etc. What is this time like for you? What is it like watching the draft, knowing one of your or multiple of your guys' names are going to be called?
You know, it really, truly, for me as a head coach in my 16th year, this is one of the most rewarding times. You get disappointed because they're no longer playing for you, which is a disappointment. But to get on the phone, I've literally probably had, half a dozen phone calls in the last 24, 48 hours, not about just one player, Johnny Newton, who'll probably be our first taken, probable first-round guy, to Tip Ryman. The first time I met him, he was 6'5", 224. Now he's 6'5" and 268 and one of the fastest climbing guys in the draft. Isaiah Adams, a guy that we recruited out of a junior college in Garden City, saw a guy that was from Canada that wrote a letter to get to Garden City to get recruited, and now he's one of the best interior linemen in this year's draft. Isaiah Adams, Casey Washington, who's played himself into a draftable position, Julian Pearl, a number of guys that have really cool stories. One of the benefits of my job, I literally get to watch 120 individual stories every year develop in front of me, right? And even though this week we've had 7 or 8 guys that are jumping into portal, guys that probably weren't at the playing time that they had felt they were going to get, which I understand. Now to see, I always tell them when they're leaving my office, we give a hug and I say, hey, this story isn't the end, it's the beginning, right? You've got a new opportunity in front of you. Go embrace and make that thing great. And that's, they don't all end on draft day, but eventually, even draft day isn't the end, it's the beginning, right? So it's a cool part of my job, right? Like, you and I both know I got a 6-year-old, 5-year-old at home that's a whole nother world, a whole nother job. But to get these young men to go to a place, my goal as a head coach is to get them to look around one day and say, holy heck, how'd I get here? Right. And that's the benefit of our job.
Well, if you can ever get a mermaid to show up to a football game, I think your girls are going to be thrilled with you. So that's something to work on. The Orange and Blue Game coming up Saturday afternoon. Bret Bielema, always great talking to you, man. Thanks.
Amen. ILL.
Presented by Walgreens, shows us the brand new head coaches from the West Coast 4 schools that are coming over here to the Big Ten, making it official in just a couple of months. You see, all of them had winning records there last year, but the coaches, 2 of them are brand new, in Deshaun Foster at UCLA and in Jed Fish at Washington. Riley and Lanning are both guys who are entering their 3rd year in charge of their programs. I want to get kind of your thoughts overall on these new guys that are coming in. Let me start with Dan Lanning. My first thought is, my man can recruit in a dangerous way for the rest of the Big Ten. I mean, he is unbelievable. They had the top class in the Big Ten this year.
It's very impressive what he can do from a personnel perspective, and managing all that talent on the roster isn't as easy as a lot of folks would end up assuming. But Dan Lanning, in a few years in Eugene, has done that at an extremely high level. We see what he is as a motivator. You catch some of those clips in the locker room itself, but then also managing a really talented coaching staff. That matters a lot also, where there was certainly groundwork that was laid with the resources that the Oregon Ducks have access to for not only talented head coaches, but coordinators as well. He's got a very deep and talented coaching staff that gives him the opportunity not only to recruit talent at a high level, but schematically to be diverse. It's a part of where a guy like Bo Nix could show up there after an Auburn career that had some fits and starts to it, but have the best season of his career. So in very short fashion, you showed development that they showed up there at the quarterback position, and a very an aggressive approach they take on that side of the football. So yes, he, as a defensive-minded guy, oversees that more closely as a head coach. But then Tosh Lupor, who was a guy who really recruited at a really high level for a long time, has been at a variety of institutions. And so the Oregon defense run by Lupor is just the latest and greatest of what he's been bringing to the table there. So to me, with Dan Lanning, not only the personnel and the recruiting from a player perspective, but as a young head coach right now, we're seeing what he does with his coaching staff and managing them.
Yeah, pretty impressive stuff. Again, only been there a couple years, and Bama wanted him. I mean, that was a real push they made to get Nick Saban. I thought it was really great for the Big Ten, to be honest, that he was like, I'm really not interested.
Yeah, right.
Things are pretty darn good over here in Eugene.
Yeah, it's not going too bad for him there.
Let's go to Lincoln Riley at USC, another guy who's entering his 3rd year. You look back at last year, they have the reigning Heisman winner. They start off, I think, 6-0 to the season, and then their defense really wasn't up to par. They didn't have anywhere near the year that they were hoping to have. They thought they'd be in the national title conversation all year long. But that's one blip on what has been a really impressive career as a head coach, dating back to Oklahoma, where we lost 10 games total in 5 years there.
If you're going to be a quarterback for Lincoln Riley, there will be an opportunity to be a first-round pick. There will be an opportunity to be a Heisman finalist and/or Heisman winner. That's just what his offensive system, what his evaluation of players at the position tends to churn out. And he does have a deep room at quarterback, as well as they've recruited some additional talent that's come in there also. But in the end, not only the offense, because we know last season a big part of the issue that was there was defensively. He went out and addressed that by going across town to the rival, to USC, bringing Danton Lynn in there to run the Trojans defense. That should pay dividends for them for what they do on that side of the football, because it is an attacking, aggressive style. I talked earlier about Kamari Ramsey, what he brings to the table as a safety. They will be deep across the back end because of what they've done in the transfer portal, but then just the development arm of that. I mean, if there's anything, as I've observed Lincoln Riley at multiple stops here, how much better do the big people get? How do you develop the line of scrimmage? And that's where between UCLA's program and USC's program, with where they're at right now, I'd say for USC, developing the line of scrimmage, the O-line and the D-line, that's really where I think Lincoln Riley needs to train his guys and make sure they're going to be exceptional in those areas trying to compete in this conference, because you know what it's like on the line of scrimmage in the Big Ten.
I was just going to say, that's something normally you would want, but in this conference in particular, you can't afford to get your O and D linemen beat up by your opponents. So we'll see if he can develop that. Let's turn to Jedd Fisch now, the man in charge of Washington, comes over from Arizona. You look at the list of guys he learned under, from Harbaugh to Belichick, Sean McVay, Pete Carroll. There's a reason he's had a pretty quick ascent in his head coaching career.
And he's been at so many different places and had success at a variety of stops before this, as an assistant and as a head coach, and been well regarded everywhere along the way up to this point. Now, schematically, what he does, he's a guy who can have success at quarterback in a variety of different ways. At times in the past, he's had folks with what we traditionally think of as sort of that pro-style principle, drop back passers, but he's also had quarterbacks who can be mobile and move around. So as Jedd Fisch has coached offense over the years, both at the professional level and the collegiate level, he's evolved and shown that he can have multiple approaches there. But then as a head coach, he hasn't just been a guy who's been able to put high-scoring offenses out there and completely ignored what happens on the defensive side. He's been able to have a program that really suits development on the defensive end of the field also. And now this will be an opportunity for Jedd Fisch to have the most resources he's ever dealt with. As a head man, having the big whistle. It's a great scene that they have in Seattle. It is also a great fan base. There's been more investment into that Dogs program in recent years than we've ever seen at any point in their history.
And momentum. You played in the national title game this past year. Now, that, of course, comes with expectations, but also with a lot of opportunities for him. One of those rare head coaches who never played college football, actually. But his story is really cool about leaving notes on, what was it, Steve Spurrier's car, trying to get his attention back at Florida just to be around him.
And he doesn't take this opportunity for granted, right? Even as long as he's been in coaching, that's a big part of knowing that story with Jedd Fisch, showcases why he doesn't take now having the big whistle at a big brand and everything that comes with it from an expectation perspective. He doesn't take it for granted for a second.
So he didn't play college football. UCLA's head coach sure did. Deshaun Foster played in the late 90s, early 2000s, was a second-round draft pick in the NFL, played for a handful of seasons there as well. You talk about the big boy whistle. He's got it now at UCLA.
And speaking of someone who ascends quickly, sort of bypasses the coordinator opportunity and gets now the opportunity to be the head coach at his alma mater. We've seen examples of that in the Big Ten where it's worked really well before, to loads of success, and now Deshaun Foster will be the latest one to have that opportunity at his alma mater. And I've talked here early on, since Deshaun Foster got this job, about investment. A couple of the other programs that I've referenced so far now have made that investment, not only in capital within the program, but the investment from the fan base, the investment of interest, of desire, of consumption of the UCLA brand. Having one of their own, one of their greatest of all time, to be the head coach there, that's a part of the thing that Deshaun Foster has told me since he took this job, that it'll be a focus for him to make sure the investment is there for alums and for fans who've been passionate about Bruins football for a long time. And
I think he got off to a good start when showing that he wants the bar to be high, when he went after Eric Bielema. I mean, a guy whose last handful of years has been, on the whole, very valuable in the NFL, and for him to be the offensive coordinator hire brought in right away shows at least what he thinks this program can certainly get to be. Now, I don't know if you heard this, Anthony. Michigan won the national championship this year.
I hear tell that took place.
That is true. You do hear tell that, and I tell you here that did happen. They're looking at their spring game coming up on Saturday. The Michigan Wolverines are, and there's an interesting storyline there that they haven't had in a long time, and that is a brand new head coach.
Sharon
Yes. Moore takes over the program as Jim Harbaugh is off to the NFL with the Chargers. So he is one of 3 new head coaches at old Big Ten schools. Let me get your initial thoughts on a guy who, as we know, was the interim last year, had great success. Also, an offensive-minded guy, fairly young, just turned 38 years old. What do you expect from him?
It has a little bit of the Ryan Day feel to me, where before Ryan Day got the full-time head coaching job at Ohio State, he had a little bit of an audition in being the acting head coach for a few games where Urban Meyer was not able to be on the sidelines with the Buckeyes. And we just saw Sharon Moore pull that off in as quality a fashion as anyone, I think, could have imagined he would last season in helping lead Michigan to a national championship. So now he gets to lead the entire program, but at least it's a program he's familiar with. This isn't a coach going into his first opportunity as the head man with a program that he doesn't know, because the personnel that carries over, which a lot of the core from the last few Big Ten titles in the national championship, a lot of that core is gone, but not all of it. So he knows the personnel. He's brought in some of the coaches as well, and Kirk Campbell, Wink Martindale on defense also. So now he gets to put his stamp on what this Michigan program can become. It's a difficult schedule. There's no doubt about that. You know, we've talked about the non-conference for Michigan a bit here over the last few years. It will not be an easy first glimpse of what Sharon Moore will have. So will he hit the ground running? I think we got to grade that on a bit of a curve just because of everything that will face the Wolverines this season.
Even though he's new, you get an idea what he's like because he's been a part of the program. Over in Bloomington, it's very different. Tom Allen is out. Elio is out. They bring in this man, Curt Cignetti, who was great at James Madison, 52-9 in his time there. A personality that is confident, fascinating, interesting every time he opens his mouth. What are you looking forward to with him?
Looking forward to seeing, first off, what the offense looks like on the field, because it's difficult at times if your personnel, especially if you're not someone who's recruited the bulk of the roster in, to have continuity, to have depth on each side of the ball. That can be a lot to ask, even though Curt Cignetti has been successful everywhere he's been before now. To say that the defense is going to be dominant as well, they'll have to make sure they're scheming up some of that dominance, some of that aggression. And his defensive coordinator, Brian Haynes, doesn't mind doing that. And he allows that freedom for him to do it. But the offense is where I certainly do think. We talked about Curtis Rourke a bit earlier in the show. What they can do offensively to make sure that they're able to just put points on the board. Maybe at times a little bit of ball control, but that's not necessarily what Cignetti is known for. But to be able to put his quarterback in a comfortable position and be able to move the football, that will have his defense in an advantageous position to bring some of that aggression that we were talking about a moment ago. So I'd say as far as either side of the ball goes, where should we have bigger expectations more immediately for the Hoosiers? Curt Cignetti's offensive resume says he has success everywhere.
It's funny, when he was asked how do you bring recruits to Indiana, his quote was, "It's simple, I win, Google me." That's what we're getting with Curt Cignetti.
Right.
Jonathan Smith comes over to Michigan State. He's the last new coach. He was the head coach for 6 years at Oregon State. Kind of a blue-collar reputation to him his entire time there.
And a lot of Michigan State fans and Big Ten fans may not recognize that just for what Jonathan Smith's resume has been, because he was a Pac-10 quarterback who put up big numbers as a passer. And then he was a Pac-12 offensive coordinator and head coach. But the run game, the line of scrimmage, that's a big part of how he's really built his brand of success back when he took over his alma mater in Corvallis at Oregon State. So he'll bring that to Michigan State. Once folks see him on the field, see his team on the field, a lot of that will end up looking familiar. It's a really intriguing blend of how he's sort of set up the staff on the whole now, because he's still a very young guy in his own right. And he's added, some of the coaches on offense that were with him at Oregon State. A lot of them came with him. And then he goes and snatches up Joe Rossi, one of the better defensive coordinators in college football, snatches him up from the conference rival Gophers. So that should put Michigan State's defense in an advantageous spot. But then a lot of what's gone on offense from last season in East Lansing, the personnel doesn't really exist anymore on offense, whereas a lot of the experience that returns for the Spartans is on defense with a new defensive mind. So I'm intrigued at how all of this ends up fitting together under Jonathan Smith's leadership.
Taking over a program that has now missed bowl games in back-to-back years after a long extended run of success. Anthony, great being with you as always, sir.
Mike, I'll see you next time, I guess.
As I mentioned, Danny Sprinkle, the new head men's basketball coach at Washington. He has had a pretty good run there, and they're looking for more success. In fact, he had a chance to sit down with our buddy Rick Pizzo for this interview right now.
Well, Coach, I appreciate the time. I'm sure this has been nuts for you since the hiring on, March 25th? So what have the last 22 days been like for you?
Yeah, it's been crazy, just nonstop, trying to, obviously you have all the meetings on campus and meeting everybody in the community and in the department, other coaches. But then also, we got to pretty much recruited an entire new team, putting a staff together and things like that. So not much sleep.
I know the living part usually comes after the coaching part. Housing, school, groceries, those kind of things usually come second. Finding the local coffee shop, though I assume that's not hard in Seattle. How has that process been for you? Have you settled in at all?
No, obviously stayed in a hotel for a couple of days and then actually staying in a friend's house right now, me and a couple staff members. And so, yeah, that's one thing. You just, we got to put this team together first and foremost. And so until we get that done, then we'll start looking for our own house and getting stuff moved up from, Utah. And we just kind of packed one bag. And so we basically had one bag of clothes for about the last 22, 23 days.
It's the glorious life of college coaching, right?
Though. What's that?
The glorious life of college coaching, right?
Exactly. Nobody thinks about that stuff.
You mentioned the roster management. Listen, it's hard these days for pretty much every program with the portal and so many guys coming and going. You're building basically from scratch. How has it been going considering needing to hire a staff, figuring out the players you have, the players you need to bring in, and the timing of all of this taking place?
Yeah, it's hard, but every school is going through it. Even coaches that have been at the same school for 10, 15 years, they're losing their entire roster. And so it's just kind of the landscape nowadays. And now you just have to recruit everybody. We have some really good kids coming on campus, and we've had a couple kids commit already and sign. And so, we're excited where we're at. But, our whole deal is we have to get the right type of players for our program and our culture and our community that are going to represent us the right way and hopefully win a lot of Big Ten games.
You had successful runs at your alma mater, Montana State, and then a year at Utah State as well. You're a highly coveted guy in this job market. Why was Seattle the right landing spot for you?
I'm a West Coast guy. Obviously, I've, followed all the, the Pac-12 back when it was Pac-12. But, being from Montana and, spending a lot of time in Los Angeles and pretty much always on the West Coast, that's always kind of been my comfort zone. And obviously, my dad played football here at University of Washington, so it's kind of a school that I grew up rooting for. So everything kind of lined up perfectly when this job opened up.
So you have yourself a new coach, you have a new AD, you're going to be part of a new conference in August. How much of a sense of community and collaboration have you already sensed inside the athletic department, knowing this is going to be new for basically everybody?
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to bond us. Like we're together now, and we all got to figure this out. And obviously, making a great transition to the Big Ten will be phenomenal for all of our sports. And so, excited to work with with Pat Chun, and obviously heard great things about him even before I came here, and before he even got hired. And so, excited, but everybody in the department's elite, and that's what makes University of Washington special, from, the faculty to everything from marketing to compliance. Like, everybody's so knowledgeable and it's just high level.
Danny, what do you think the biggest challenges will be that are inherent in not just joining a new conference, but joining a conference that's going to have 18 teams and stretches all the way from Seattle to the Eastern Seaboard?
Yeah, I mean, obviously just how good all the teams are. I think, when you look at the home court advantages, and I'm just speaking from basketball, it's awesome. I think I saw somewhere the highest home winning percentage has been in the Big Ten. So it just shows how hard it is to win on the road. But then I think another challenge, especially for us West Coast, is going to be travel. It's going to be a lot of travel, but it's going to be fun. And once you get into some of these environments, you don't get tired when you're playing in some of the environments in the Big Ten.
I do have some good news for you, Coach. You do not have to game plan for Zach Edey this coming season.
Hey, thank God. Thank God. Yeah, he can go. Just go. Go to the NBA, go wherever you want to go. I don't need to see him on a scouting report or on the court again.
In a league, Danny, that's been known for stability, especially in the head coaching world, you have so many guys here that have been at their Big Ten schools for 8, 10, in the case of Matt Painter and Tom Izzo, much longer than that. You're one of 4 new coaches this year inside the Big Ten when everybody joins in early August. How much of success in coaching in today's world depends on your willingness to deal with the instability that we're going to see, and it's probably not going to change anytime moving forward.
Yeah, I think, it's what it is nowadays. And, I think you have to be ready for, some of your good players to leave and other players. So, you have to be ready to, pretty much recruit 5 or 6 kids every year. And, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's almost like probably coaches that have to deal, junior college coaches. That's what they've been doing for years, but you look at even the G League or some other professional teams where, you might have, those guys have guys for 3 months and then during the season, they're getting a new team. And so, you kind of have to be able to adjust your style a little bit and, you probably have to coach a little bit differently. But, I think it's exciting, and I think it's kind of fresh. And, these players are used to jumping from AAU team to AAU team or high school. So they're used to it, and they're used to playing with different people and different styles. So, I think the quicker the coaches adjust to that, I think the more successful you'll be.
And we've seen some guys jump into this league, Lance Jones at Purdue, Marcus Domask at Illinois, from smaller conferences and immediately come in as transfer portal impact players. How much of your history and the time you spent at Montana State and Utah State and recruiting those kind of players could help you particularly in situations like that to benefit the Huskies?
Yeah, I think, a lot of these players are showing that. We had 2 players that came from Montana State to Utah State, Great Osabar and Darius Brown, who were both first-team All-League, and Great was MVP of the Mountain West. And he was coming off the bench at Montana State for us. And so I think it shows the talent at the younger levels, and there's so much parity in college basketball. I mean, a first-team All-League guy in any league, no matter what league he's in, they can play in any league. And so it just shows how good the players are nowadays with their skill level. And now you just have to fit the right personalities together. I think that's the biggest challenge for us coaches is you have to get culture guys that fit and want to win, that don't want to just get, the NIL money, but they want to be a part of a team and get their degree and do the right things.
And I know, Danny, that can take a while sometimes to get the guys that both fit your culture and how you want to play. So for those who didn't get to see your teams in either Bozeman or Logan, once you get those guys in, what style should we expect from your teams?
Yeah, we coach them hard. We like to be tough. We like to be physical and disciplined. I think there's still you can still be old school and win a lot of games. And, we want to make sure our guys are playing the right way. You got to take care of the ball. We want to play fast and free offensively, especially on misses and turnovers. But, you can only do that if you're a high-level defensive team and rebounding the ball. If you're taking the ball out of the net, you can't play as fast as you want. So, we have to be really, solid defensively and make teams score over the top of us. Like you said, which we didn't do with Zach Edey and Purdue in the tournament. But it's, like anybody, there's a certain formula to success that we have, and we got to recruit to that type of player.
Hey, defense travels, and obviously be doing a lot of traveling next year without question. I know we can't officially say welcome to the conference for another 3 months and change, but welcome anyway. Yep. We appreciate the time. We look forward to working with you and your team moving forward.
That's right. Glad to be here. Appreciate you guys having me.
Well, some basketball news. There's a Big Ten to Big Ten transfer. Gavin Griffiths is officially going from Rutgers to Nebraska. Averaged 18 minutes of action, 5 points, and a pretty good three-point shooter, which, as we saw this year, that works well for Fred Hoiberg and Nebraska. There was massive news on the women's side. Lucy Olson has committed to the Iowa Hawkeyes. If you don't know who she is, she was the number 3 scorer in the country this past year. The only people who scored more per game than her 23 a contest was Juju Watkins, who's joining the Big Ten, and Caitlin Clark, who Olsen will be replacing at the guard position in Iowa. It is a huge pickup, arguably the best transfer pickup yet for Lisa Bluter in her Iowa career. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of our show, Big Ten Today. Thank you so much for watching. We got another one coming your way Friday morning, so we will see you then at noon Eastern, 10 Central Time. Pardon me, 11 Central Time. For Anthony Herron, I'm Mike Hall. We'll see you on Friday.